All right, so the second page is a little bit trickier, but we got this. So it says, Mr. Boyd checks the gauge on his home's fuel tank on the first day of every month. The line graph to the right was created using the data he collected. So I want you to think about fuel tanks, just to like a little bit of background knowledge, because not everybody has those at home. But those are something that some people use for like heating. So he's checking that fuel gauge at home. This isn't like fuel like in a car, it's fuel at his home. So a lot of people have those for heating. According to the graph, during which months does the amount of fuel decrease most rapidly? So they use the most amount of fuel during those months. You can, very similar to how we noticed in the first one, it's most rapidly, meaning it has the most, it's very quick, very fast, and since it decreases, the fuel decreases, we're looking for a trend that goes down. You'll notice a couple different ones. So you'll notice here it goes down, and then here it quickly goes up. That up is not what we're looking for because it says decrease. So be very careful to read these super carefully. This one, I noticed, decreases 3 spaces, where this one decreases 2. This is 1, 1, 1. Each of these are even less than 1, and that's 1. So it's got to be this one that decreases 3 spaces. And that was January. So January, you can see at the bottom the months. January is when that fuel decreased the most. So write this in a full sentence, but I'm putting January. So I would say something like January is the month where the fuel decreases most rapidly. Remember, because we want to use some of those words that are in here. Not all the words, but we want to restate the question in our answer. The Boyds took a month-long vacation. During which month did this most likely occur? Explain how you know using the data in the graph. So, if they were gone, they were completely away from their house, would they need that heat? Probably not. So we're probably looking for a time when they didn't use any fuel. They weren't at home, they were all gone, so they probably completely shut that down. So, looking here, I see right here it went completely flat. So that is between July and August. So in July, remember to write these as a full sentence. In July, no fuel was used because the line is flat. That's probably when they went on vacation, because they didn't need to use it. Mr. Boyd's fuel company filled his tank once this year. During which month did this most likely occur? Explain how you know. Well, when you're getting fuel, whether it's in your car or in your home fuel tank, this gauge, because this is this gauge reading over on the side, this gauge goes from empty or wherever you fill it up to full or close to full. So we're looking for, since it was filled, we know that it's going to be going up. The gauge reading is going to go up. So the biggest spike up we see, in fact, the only spike up we see, is between M and J, which is May. You might think it's March, but if you look at the bottom, January, February, March, April, May. So, writing in a full sentence, the tank was filled in May because the line went up, meaning fuel was added. The Boyd family's fuel tank holds 284 gallons of fuel when full. How many gallons of fuel did the Boyds use in February? Okay, so in February, first of all, we need to figure out how much each line represents. February it went down 2 lines, and each one is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and since this is half, each of those are 16. So we would have this 284 gallons divided by 16 tick marks, because if that full thing is 16 marks and that full thing is 284 gallons, we want to find out what each of those represents. Go ahead and pause the video and divide 284 by 16. Okay, I've already done this to the side and I don't want to make our video too crazy long, so that ends up being 17 and 75 hundredths of a gallon, also known as 17 and 3/4 of a gallon. But February, it doesn't just drop down 1, it drops down 2. So we need to multiply now. We need to take, since this is each tick mark and it went down 2, we need to multiply or even just add the 17 and 3/4 or 17 and 75 hundredths of a gallon by 2. So we need to multiply that by 2. Go ahead and do that. Pause the video. Okay, and that ends up equaling, so if I multiply that by 2, that ends up equaling 35 and 5/10, or 35 and a half, meaning that 35 and a half gallons of fuel were used in that month. Make sure you write that in a complete sentence. Mr. Boyd pays $3.54 per gallon of fuel. What is the cost of fuel used in February and March? Okay, so this is a very short question, but it's also a very complicated one because it's asking you to know that the price per gallon, and it's asking you to have the amount of fuel used in February and March. We know how much was used in February, but if we look here, between February and March, it went down 1, 2, 3 tick marks. So, since we already figured out in the previous question what each tick mark represented, we have 2 options here. We can take that amount and we can multiply it by 3, since it went down 3 tick marks, or we can take our answer from the previous one and add that amount right there. The reason we can add that is because that would be the third. So it'd be 35 and 5/10 plus 17 and 75 hundredths. Go ahead and pause and either add those or multiply. Your choice. Lovely thing about math is there's more than one way to do it. If I multiply, I chose to multiply on the side. I ended up getting 53 and 25 hundredths. So that's how many gallons that they used. Now what you can do is you need to figure out how much they paid for fuel. You're going to multiply that by 3 and 54 hundredths. This is bringing back those skills from previous modules of multiplying decimals. Remember, when we're multiplying those, we want to make sure we're doing it very carefully. And we want to make sure we're putting the decimal in the right spot. One way we can do that is to check for reasonableness. So when I got my answer, pause, figure that out. When I got my answer of 188 and 51 cents, I had to think, is this reasonable? One way to check for reasonableness with decimals is to think about those whole numbers. 53 is about close to 50, and 3 is 3. If I multiply 50 times 3, I get 150. So I have to think, is this pretty close to 150? And yes, I would say that it's pretty close to 150. If I multiplied and got my decimal in the wrong spot, if I accidentally put the decimal behind that 5, I would say, oh, maybe I made a mistake and I need to check back and see what happened. So please make sure you're very careful with multiplying and make sure you're checking for reasonableness with your answers. And we will be reviewing multiplying with decimals again as well. All right, thank you so much for joining me for Lesson 19, problem set of Module 6. And I look forward to talking to you guys later. Thank you.